You're staring at your resume, cursor blinking over the last role you held, and you can't find the words for what you actually did there. Somewhere along the way, that job turned into something that you never agreed to take, and now you're supposed to explain it in 3 bullet points. Welcome back to your Trauma-Wise Career Guide. I'm your host, Cyndi Bennett. Most resume advice assumes the job you're describing is the job you agreed to take. It doesn't account for what happens when the role changed underneath you, when responsibilities shifted, support disappeared, or the position became something else entirely by the time you left. Today, we're working through 6 ways to build a resume that reflects what you actually brought to your work, regardless of how that chapter closed or how far it drifted from what you signed up for. This is job search territory, so we're staying practical. No deep processing today, just the specific thinking that goes into the document itself. Let's get into it. The first way is to start with what actually happened in your work, not how it ended. A resume is a record of your work. That record stands on its own, separate from how the chapter closed or how much the role shifted along the way. When an ending was hard, it's easy to let that ending color everything that came before it. You might find yourself downplaying a project because the role that followed it fell apart, or hesitating to list an accomplishment because the person who should have recognized it never did. What often helps here is a simple separation. The exit is one data point. It happened on one day, under one set of circumstances, often shaped by decisions you didn't make. The work itself took months or years, and it's made up of hundreds of decisions you made. Your resume is built from those decisions, not from the last one. Number 2, translate your role into outcomes, even when the role itself shifted under you. Job titles and duties tell a hiring manager what you were assigned. Outcomes tell them what you actually did with it. This matters even more when a role morphed over time, because the title you started with and the work you ended up doing might barely resemble each other. Outcome language gives you a way to describe the real work without getting tangled in how you drifted from the original job description. I invite you to consider working backward from the impact rather than forward from the title. What changed because you were there? What got built, fixed, stabilized, or grown under your work, independent of whether the role still matched what you were hired for by the time you left? Those outcomes belong to you, and they still belong to you now. Number 3, decide what belongs on the resume and what belongs in the conversation. One of the most common patterns I see is the instinct to explain the shift or the exit somewhere on the page. A line about restructuring, a note about scope creep, something that quietly justifies why the role looks different than expected before anyone can ask about it. The resume doesn't need to carry that explanation. A resume's job is narrow. It shows what you did and where you did it. The story of how a role changed or why a chapter closed belongs in a conversation on your terms with context you control. Keeping that boundary on the page protects you from over-explaining to someone who hasn't earned the full story yet. Number 4, watch the language you use about your own value. When a role expanded, contracted, or shifted without any real support behind it, it's common to write about yourself in smaller language than what the work deserves. Words like assisted, helped with, or supported, when the truer words might be led, built, or managed. This isn't about inflating anything. What often helps is noticing where an unsupported or shifting role might still be shaping how you describe your own contribution and adjusting the language back to what actually happened while you were doing the work. A resume works best when it's grounded in that, rather than in whatever the smaller story you've started to tell yourself since. Number 5, handle employment gaps or odd-shaped roles with simple, factual framing. Gaps in unusual role shapes get more complicated than they need to be when the instinct is to over-explain them in writing. A line about health, caregiving, a layoff, or a role that absorbed 3 other jobs rarely needs more than a few plain words, if it needs anything at all. Hiring managers are used to seeing gaps in odd trajectories. What tends to raise flags isn't the gap or the shift itself, it's the language that reads as anxious or apologetic around it. You might notice the difference between a factual note and a defensive one. A factual note states what actually happened without asking for permission. A defensive note tries to preempt judgment before it's been offered. The first one tends to land better, and it costs you less to write. Number 6, build the resume forward toward what's next. This might be the most important shift of the 6. A resume shaped by a role that drifted or an ending that was hard often gets built backward, structured around explaining or containing what went sideways. A resume that reflects your real value gets built forward, structured around the role you're stepping into. This means the accomplishments you choose to highlight, the language you use, and even the order you present things in should be selected because they point toward where you're going. The exit already happened, and the role it turned into already happened. Neither one gets a vote in how this document is built. None of this requires you to pretend the role was what it should have been, or that its drift didn't cost you something. The resume's job is to reflect the value you already built, value that was true before things shifted and remains true now. If you want to go deeper on this, on the exact language choices, gap phrasing, and structural decisions that go into a resume like this, that's the kind of work we do inside the Resilient Career Academy. I would be honored to be part of your journey. You can find me at resilientcareers.substack.com. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Your Trauma-Wise Career Guide. I'll see you next time. You're not walking this path alone. Every step you take toward a trauma-wise career is an act of courage, and I'm here cheering you on. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with another survivor who needs to hear this message. Together, we're rewriting the rules of career success. Keep rising, keep healing, keep building.